Um, what we're going to talk about in this session is going to even get more practical. This was actually the first training that I ever did with my Beyond Awkward stuff. This is the thing that got me going, so to speak, is I would just be training students all the time how to turn casual conversations into eternal encounters. People would often say to me, how do you get in all these conversations? How are you always leading people to the Lord? What's going on? And so I just took time to think about, hey, yeah, what do I do? Like, what are the principles that are at play in my life that allow me to get into conversations well? This is not, how would I say it? This is not a step-by-step guide, like, hey, if you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, then you're going to have powerful encounters. I'm giving you some principles. So it's not a silver bullet. That's what I'm saying. I want to be very careful to say it. These are things that I practice and I do, and I think they really help in spiritual conversations. But then sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm not, selling you this too very well right now, am I? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about pool volleyball. One of my favorite stories is when I moved from San Diego to Los Angeles. My wife calls me because she gets up to the house that we're renting in Los Angeles, and I'm still in San Diego, kind of closing things up in our previous home. It's about you guys are West Coasters, I'm used to telling this when I'm in like Louisiana, and they're like, huh? Okay, so it's about 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away. And she calls me and she goes, you're not going to believe what just happened. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's never good. And she goes, our neighbor's crazy. And I'm like, oh, great. I go, what happened? She goes, well, so our driveways share. So like our garages look at each other. It's one of those dual driveways. So like our front door's here, his is there, and they look. So we pull in, she's unpacking, and our movers come, and the moving truck has to block our driveway. So the driver goes up to our new neighbor and says, hey, I'm going to need to block the driveway for like 2 or 3 hours. Do you want to get your vehicle out? Because you're not going to be able to get out for the next 3 hours. And he goes, bleepity, 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 you bleepity, bleepity. I'm an owner. They're a renter. This is my property. You're not blocking my driveway for them. He's like, you bleepity, bleepity. And she's just swearing up a storm at this guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she goes, yeah. And then the driver said, well, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you I'm going to block the driveway. So would you like to get your vehicle out? And he's like, oh, bleep, 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 bleep. She's like, this is our neighbor. But wait, there's more. She goes, blocks the driveway. Then this guy gets in his vehicle, Ford Explorer, and drives over his lawn, over the curb, peels out, and takes off. Okay? Then comes back 10 minutes later, over the curb, over the lawn, into the driveway, gets out, 18-pack of beer, brings it up to the truck driver, and he's like, sorry for being a jerk. Here's your beer. She's like, yeah, exactly. What would you do? And she's like, this is our neighbor. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to start praying about it right now. So I'm driving up, praying about it. So, of course, when I get up, she says something like, hey, my husband will be here in a couple hours or whatever, blah, blah. So, of course, about a couple hours, he's conveniently out in the front watering things, probably waiting for me. And I get out, and I'm like, what's up, man? How you doing? And he's like this big, burly guy. And my go-to in connecting with people is always sports. I'm a sports guy. So I'm like, what's up, man? Yeah, my name's Beau. Good to meet you. We'll call him Ben. And I go, are you into sports? He's like, oh, yeah, man. Love sports. Love the Dodgers. Love the Rams. He's like, I'm all about it. And I'm like, yeah, me too. I'm like, I love sports. He's like, are you competitive? And my wife is like, you did not just ask my husband if he's competitive. Like, wrong thing, because I can be too competitive. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm competitive. I love being competitive. I'm like, what's up? He's like, pool volleyball this Saturday, 2 p.m. And I'm thinking, pool volleyball? So you're not very competitive. I didn't say that. But I'm thinking this you can't be serious. He's like, so anyways, I'm like, okay, I'm going to connect with this guy, this crazy guy. So I go down, I meet him. He drives me down to this apartment complex that has pool volleyball set up. And the best way I can explain it is it's like all guys in their 50s that are all divorced or single who don't know the Lord working out their issues in the pool. So to give you an example, there's no lines for out of bounds. They're invisible lines in the water. Yet every time you call, they would say, well, this is out. So if it goes right here, like, hey, that was out. Bleepity, bleepity, you lied. That's not out. That went in. You got to be kidding me. What's your bleeping problem? Like, sorry, you're right. It must have hit the line. Okay, so like swearing, arguing, super intense about this game. Like it's a war for like 3 hours, okay? And so I go with him. I'm leaving. I'm like, yeah, man, that was pretty intense. He's like, yeah, isn't that great? And all this. And I'm like, okay. So I go back the next weekend, same stuff, arguing. So I call one out, and now I'm named the priest. Somehow they find out I'm religious. And they're like, screw you, priest. That wasn't in. You know, they're swearing at me now, yelling at me. So I'm just hanging out with this guy, and I'm like, what in the world is going on with this thing? But I'm committed to building a relation with this guy. So, third or fourth time driving down with this guy, we start talking, and he just starts unloading to me about his marriage and about, like, struggles they're having and this and that. And I'm just listening, and he starts talking to me about how much he drinks to kind of like numb out the pain, or like, I just, do this to check out or that. And I'm just listening to him. And I sense the Holy Spirit say to me, I want you to ask this guy where he thinks God is in this. Now, want to talk about being nervous? I was nervous. I was sweating because this guy's explosive, right? I'm in a car with him driving. And he's going on about all this stuff and his marriage and drinking. And I'm going to be like, and he's made it clear to me actually that he's not religious. I did know that. He's offered that up before. Not religious, don't go to church, blah, blah, almost like, don't try me, bro, So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to ask this guy. And I decided I'm going to ask him, where do you, with all this that you're sharing with me, like, do you have any idea where God could be in this for you? So I'm going to ask him. And I'm so nervous. I remember where we were on the road that we were on. And I say, listen, man, thanks for sharing. I said, I'm religious. I'm the priest. I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. I said, I'm religious. I got to ask, where do you think God is in this for you with your marriage, drinking, all that? And he goes, oh, my God. I always wanted to know how to get to heaven. Tell me how to get to heaven. I want to know how to get to heaven. Like that. And I'm like, what? This ain't what we're talking about, And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, I never thought I'd be able to get to heaven. He's like, I don't know how to get there. I know there's a hell, but like, I guess I'm going there. But, I want to know how to get to heaven. Like, can you tell me how to get to heaven? And so I'm like, yeah. So I explained him the gospel and all of that. And he's like, okay, that's great. And then we get to volleyball. So it's like time to go to the pool. He's like, all right. Great talk. And I'm like, what just happened? So we play volleyball, do all that thing again, driving back. And I'm like, listen, man, God can help you in what you're going through. Like, he can be there for you. He can be a different source than just drinking or rage or whatever. And we're talking through it. And I can't get him to go any further than that. It's just like, that's great. Thank you. It's amazing. See you later. We get home. He's like, see you later. Goes in his house. And I couldn't get him first. So I'm going to pause the story there because I'm going to get into some of my principles. But I just wanted to set that up. They're like, this was a guy that was like the scariest guy for me. And I'm like, now I'm in a spiritual conversation with him. And I'm getting into it. I'm in the middle of it. And it becomes an ongoing thing because he lives next door to me. This is the same guy. I turned my garage into like a man cave type thing. Because, you have the same garage here. They open up, like, obviously every garage opens up. That was a stupid comment. These garages that open. But anyways, I had a couch in there with the TV. We'd watch football. He loved watching football with me. And he would just bring over a 6-pack of Corona and watch football with me while I'm watching. I love the Seahawks. He loves the Rams. Okay? So much to the point, I see you, man. I would be going to church, and, then the Rams were in St. Louis, so they would play at 10 a.m. So he would be like, hey, can I watch football while you go to church? So he would just go in my garage and watch football with his beer at 10 a.m. while I'm going to church. And then I would come back, and we would watch more football together. I'll leave that there for later. When it comes to having spiritual conversations, like we've been talking all day, we want to be in the relational evangelism category, which is right here in the middle. An act of love that syncs up the gospel with their current reality, right? And accusational evangelism is on this right side, which is kind of the pushy thing. By the way, you have all these worksheets if you hit that link from earlier. So you should be able to get access to these. Accusational evangelism is a gospel presentation that starts with no concern for where they are. It's just like, I'm going to talk to you about Jesus. I haven't even asked you a question about yourself. And that's it. A lot of times when we're doing tracks, we can get like that. Or if we have an agenda, we're just kind of, I call it like shotgun evangelism. Like I'm just shoot and run, Like I'm just going to throw it at you. And I'm like, all right, see you later. And I'm like, wait, what was that guy's name? And then stealth evangelism is attentiveness to where they are, but never starting a conversation. Like we don't want to be stealth. We don't want to be accusational. We want to be relational, which is that act of love that syncs up the gospel with their current reality. Relational can be in the moment, first time I've met you. It could be long term. I don't mean relational as in I have to build a long relation with you. It means I'm going to be relational with you, right? I'm going to cater what I'm sharing with you about Jesus to who you are and what I know about you. And in the moment, you can find out a lot about people, like I just did on the plane with that woman that I was sharing with you about. Like, I don't have a long relation with her, but I was able to do it in a relational way, okay? So this is what we're looking for. The first thing, I think, if we're going to take spiritual conversations and turn them into eternal encounters, is we have to address our mind frame, okay? What is essential to think if we want to have great spiritual conversations? So there's 3 things that I'm constantly thinking about. These are going to seem like super simple and like obvious, but when we unpack them for a minute, you're going to be like, yeah, I don't really tend to think this way. Number 1 is we have to believe that the harvest is plentiful right now, today. Like the harvest is plentiful today. The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, okay? I believe that. I pray about it. That's what I'm expecting. I am expecting to run into the harvest. I'm expecting to run into people that are ready to come to faith. Okay? Most of you in this room tend to think the harvest is few and the laborers are plentiful. Meaning, there's not that many people that are open to God, and I'm sure if someone is, Ray will talk to them. Right? Or pastor will talk to him, or she'll talk to him. Like, there's plenty of people that are ready to talk to him, and there's not even that many people that are open to God anyways, so I don't really need to do anything about this. Like, we tend to accidentally think that way, a lot of us, instead of there's way more people ready to come to God than there are witnesses. That's the truth about Scripture. Second one is you are the person God is going to use, not your pastor. There are people that you are designed to lead to faith, not your pastor. Your pastor will never be able to lead them to faith. They won't be effective with that person. You are the person that's going to be effective with them. There are people in this world that you are assigned to lead to faith that no one else is going to be able to lead to faith or will lead to faith. They're your assignment. God's going to use you to reach them. Now, I know it feels like a lot of pressure. The third one takes the pressure off. God will create the opportunities for you to share your faith. You don't have to go create all these things and like make them happen. But if we're not thinking correctly, nothing else is going to matter with how we navigate spiritual conversations. We have to believe that the harvest is plentiful. When I walk out my door every day, there are people that are ready to come to faith. And I am designed to reach some of these people. And I'm assigned to reach some of these people. And God is going to create opportunities. If you pray that and you build that mentality, it will absolutely change the way that you go about sharing your faith. The harvest is plentiful. Where are they? I know they're for me to lead to faith. And like, God, you're creating opportunities. Just show me where they are. I'm ready to see them. You can't help but walk into some opportunities that you would never walk into if your mind frame is, there's not that many people come to faith. I don't know what I'm doing. It's not my responsibility. It's why I'm not a pastor. And like, God doesn't ever do anything with me. You'll be sitting next to a lady on the plane and you won't even talk to her. And she was ready to have a great conversation. See what I'm saying? Very simple, but I have to start with this one. Where's your mind frame? What do you tend to think? I want to even just give a pause for a minute and let you know. What do you tend to think about the harvest, yourself, and God when you set out for your day? I want to just give you 1 minute of silence. What do you tend to think? What's your mind frame? All right, so mind frame, it's the foundation. I told you all I played college golf. A lot of people ask me to help them on their swing. Can you make me a better golfer? Well, anyone who's going to be any good at golf, you got to fix their grip and their stance. Okay? They always want to learn how to hit it far, like, how's my swing? I'm like, I don't care about your swing. Show me your grip, show me your stance. If I can fix your grip, I can fix your stance, your swing is going to have a chance. Okay? And I think with sharing our faith, that's what the mind frame is. Like, what are you thinking about yourself, about the harvest, about God? If you're not thinking correctly, the rest of what I'm going to share, you're not going to do anyways. You're not even going to be able to use it. So we have to get our mind frame right. And the way you build that is in prayer, is praying these out, confessing it to God, getting your heart and your mind to believe even that first point. I mean, shoot, just believing that with strong conviction will change the way you look for things. Okay, second thing with turning conversations into spiritual ones is becoming a great question asker. So we've talked about this a little bit. Some have mentioned listening and asking great questions, but curiosity leads us to knowing more about people. Learn to care about other people's lives and what is going on inside of them. Learn to ask great questions. I think the best evangelists are the most curious people. So this actually has nothing to do with being extroverted or introverted at all. The best evangelists I know are the most curious people. Some of them are very introverted, and they do a lot of one-on-one evangelism. It's because they really care about people. They're really curious about people. They want to ask questions. The more questions we ask, the more we're interested in people, the more we learn, so we know how to have better conversations with them about Jesus. And part of the reason I get in so many great conversations is because I'm curious about people. I actually think that's my secret sauce, if I have one, is that I'm curious about people. And I want to know them. I want to talk to them. I want to figure it out. I like making relationships. And so if you're wanting to grow in your witness or your ability to have spiritual conversations, grow your curiosity and learn how to ask great questions with the people around you. Before I move on to the next, I want you to go into your groups for a minute, and I want you just to talk about what are your favorite questions to ask people that you're trying to get to know more about. These don't have to be spiritual questions. Like, just what are some of your favorite questions to ask people? Make a list as a table group so we can compile a bunch of great questions. Go ahead. Take a minute. What are some of your favorite questions? All right. Let's bring it back. So, did you hear some interesting questions? Okay. I put a sheet in that folder, the link you got, that has some of my favorite conversation starters. So it's in that link that you could hit earlier. I'm sure they'll put it up at the end. But I put a number of my favorite conversation starters on here. Or how to, like, spiritual questions you can ask too. It's kind of a mix. I always love to ask people about sports. I think the common things like what do you do, what do you study, all of that is obvious, but asking questions that get more at meaning. So like why do you want to do the things that you do? Like why are you excited about that job, or why are you pursuing that major? Like what's behind that? Like trying to find more of their passions or motives. It's interesting, if you take time to really get to know people and ask them questions, grab coffees with them, I still think one of the most effective ways to do any kind of ministry, but especially college ministry, is just getting coffee with people. Like, let me buy you a cup of coffee. I'd love to hear more about you. People you don't know. Asking them questions, getting to know them. There's hardly anyone in this world that is making the point to be curious about their life. I don't know if I said that very well, but most people don't have others in their life that are like, I'm just so curious about you. I'd love to get to know you. They don't have people to listen to them or learn about them. And I'm telling you, I try to ask questions and learn about them as long as I can before they ask about me or I start talking about myself. I almost make it a competition to see like how long can I go. And some people will never ask me a question, and it's almost getting annoying at that point. It's like they're so hungry to talk and tell you about what's going on that I've created a relationship that is very one-sided. I'll come, hey, how you doing? Oh, yeah, let me tell you about this, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I got to go. See you later. And I'm like, oh, they never ask any questions about me. But that's a good thing because they're not there to serve me. I'm there to serve them. And being a great question asker or curious about people's lives or what they're doing is going to help you learn how to have really great, powerful, relational, and like on-point spiritual conversations. And here's why. Because I already had you pause and discuss. The third thing that I do that's intuitive for me is I'm always trying to find the handle in their life for the conversation. So when we ask great questions, we find a context to share the gospel into. For example, you find out their mom is sick and they think God is distant and doesn't care. This is a context to share the gospel into and a handle to turn the conversation spiritually. A handle is a theme or struggle in a person's life that emerges in a conversation. So I'm constantly looking for a handle, like, I see you guys are writing. I want to hit my slide, but you look intently writing. Okay, well, just tell me to go back. A handle is like a door handle. That's what I mean by handle, like something you can grab onto. And so I think where awkwardness comes in the conversation is like, I know I need to have a spiritual conversation with this person. It's getting awkward. But I think the most powerful way to have a conversation or turn a normal conversation spiritually is to grab onto that handle that is in their life, and you're checking to see if the door is unlocked, right? Like behind that door is a divine encounter that's potentially waiting. This is how I check the curiosity pulse or the spiritual pulse. Is I'm listening to them, and I'm going to give you examples. And when I turn the conversation, I'm going to ask them questions that have to do with what they're sharing with me. And I'm going to try to talk with them about God based off what they're sharing with me to see if they're open. And if they're open, the door swings open, and then I'm able to be more bold in talking about Jesus, which we're going to get to in a minute. If it's not, then I have to become present and patient, and I'm not going to keep pushing. So back to that conversation with my new friend, the neighbor, and we're in the car. I turned the conversation spiritual based off what he was sharing with me about his marriage and drinking, all that. And I said, hey, where do you think God is in that you're sharing with me? I didn't just say, hey, man, need to talk to you about heaven or hell. Like, do you think you're going to heaven if you died today? Do you know where you'd be going? Like, I didn't just throw that out of the blue in our car ride. I'm listening to him, and I asked a very simple question. Do you know where do you think God could be in that situation? I'm trying to talk to him right about that. Because most of the time, people want to connect with God or will connect with God in their felt needs, like what's relevant to them. And so I'm always looking for that. I put on this little image like fear, frustration, anger. Like usually there's fears coming up for people or anger or frustration. I actually want to grab onto that, and I want to talk to them about God through that fulcrum. because that's where God is most relevant to them. That's where God has something to say to them. Let me stop. Is there any questions about the handle? Any confusion I need to clear up? Are we tracking? Does it make sense? Okay. So, let me have you go back into your table groups and just talk about that idea of finding the handle. Being a great question asker, being curious about people, and looking for the handle. And that's the place that you can kind of check the curiosity pulse. Talk in your groups, like, how do you like that idea? What's bothering you about it? Any questions? Like, how is that helpful to you or not? Talk in your groups for a minute. All right, let's keep going. I want to just give you a minute to process that. If you have questions, I'll take some more in a little bit once I get through all the principles. But the handle is so important. You even noticed yesterday, or when I'm telling you about my story yesterday on the plane, like I'm listening, I'm learning about that lady, and God gave me an analogy about the gas line. Like that's even an example of a handle of like, hey, she's got this problem going on in her life where she's like, I'm not going to go to church because my marriage and all of that. Well, I use that analogy of the gas line to turn it further with her of like, hey, you've got a gas leak in your life, in your marriage. Like, we need to talk about this. I think it allows me to be even more powerful, in a sense, in the conversation, or challenging, but in a relational and loving way. When I'm thinking about my friends and they're bringing up stuff with me, or like a new friend I meet, I'm not coming out with the Jesus stuff always right away. Like, I'm building friendships with them. I'm watching a game with them. I'm going out to eat. But as I'm learning and they're sharing things, I'm waiting for that right moment to be able to say, hey, I noticed you were talking to me about this. I would love to talk to you about how God could do something about that if you would ever want to talk. I'm using the thing they're sharing to say, like, if you ever want to have a spiritual conversation, I would love to talk to you about God. I think he really could do something about that. Or, hey, you might want to pay attention to that. Like, would you ever be open to talking more with me about Jesus, or letting me pray for you? And it creates a potential conversation where that door comes swinging wide open. I'm always looking for that. It's like I'm laying in the weeds, and then I'm like, hey, that very thing that you've been sharing that's important to you, what if God could do something there? Let's talk about that. And I'm like, is the door going to come open, or is it not? If the door comes open, the first thing I'm doing is I'm sharing my story powerfully. Like, I want to know how to tell my testimony in lots of different forms. And I don't even just mean coming to the Lord, but like how God's met me in different aspects of my life. Like, how's God met me in anger? How's God met me in lust? How's God met me in patience? Of course, how I've come to the Lord too is important. But we want to be able to tell little vignettes of like, here's how God's been powerful for me in my handles, in the themes that are in my life. Like, God's relevant. He's real. He's doing stuff. He's moving now. Here's how he's active in my life. So even as it says on the slide, when we can locate a handle in someone's story, it is absolutely the best thing if we can share our story right into their context. But this demands us to be aware of the multiple handles we have in our story as well. So one of the questions I would ask you is, what is one of your transformational stories? Where has God changed you or impacted you in your life? Lust, anger, impatience, greed, lostness, etc. This is stuff that we want to work on, is like knowing how to tell our stories of transformation where God has met us. This is like another illustration. If that door's open, like the spiritual conversation's open, you know, I'm sharing personally into them vulnerability myself. You know, I want to tell them things that are relevant about my story. And like, all of that's connecting to their curiosity and to their questions. And you see this guy has like 2 S's in his hands. One is story. The other one is sharing Jesus stories. So not just the gospel. Of course, we're going to share the gospel. But we also want to know how to share Jesus stories right into a person's context. So what I've become really good at, and I'm going to show you a slide of a few of them, is I'm big on story. I think most people connect through story well. So if I'm hearing your story and you're sharing themes and I find a connection and you're open to a spiritual conversation, I want to figure out how to help you see that like God has met me in ways like that too. Like he's moving my, I don't want to just come at you with truth right away. Like, I'm sorry if, that's on me that I'm letting you fall asleep. So you need to hit her. I'm big on story. So if I am in a conversation with someone and they're sharing with me vulnerably and I turn the conversation and they're open. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I would love to know how God could meet me there. I'm not coming at like Romans with them like, hey, you know the wages of sin is death. And like, yeah, bro, you gotta take care of that thing. No, I'm coming at them with like, man, I've seen Jesus show up powerfully before in my marriage, or I have a friend that was dealing with this in their marriage, and like, I know God can show up. Let me tell you this story. Let me give you hope. I'm trying to give them a taste of hope with it. But then I'm also looking for Jesus stories. I'm logging these things in. I'm studying that have themes that go with the same kind of thing. So if they're like dealing with hopelessness, I want to tell a Jesus story quickly where Jesus came in and made a situation hopeful, right? Like the wedding at Cana. Man, I'm telling you, Jesus, he can show up, and even when all the wines run out, he can throw down 900 bottles of wine, which is a lot of kegs, 12 kegs of wine, and that can last you many days. Yes, I do know that that's how much it was, 180 gallons. It's crazy. I'm a math guy too. So like, I'm telling my story, I'm telling Jesus stories when I'm talking to them. Like the prodigal son, Luke 15, Jesus searches after those who have walked away. Or Jesus turns water into wine, Jesus abundantly provides. Or the adulterous woman, John 8, even when we sin, Jesus doesn't accuse. The calling of Levi, Jesus calls the worst of sinners to follow him. The 7 woes, Matthew 23, Jesus gets angry at hypocrisy just like you. So like I'm paying attention to these stories, and this goes back to even our conversation on Acts 8, where like Philip had some preparation. I think we're at our best when we're able to learn people's stories and we can share ours, and we can help them understand, hey, God sees you in that moment because he did the same kind of thing in one of these stories. And I'm telling it quickly, briefly, and if they're more curious, I'm going to say, hey, why don't we get together and look at that story together? Like, let's go deeper with it. I found a lot of effectiveness with that. The last thing I'm doing is I'm inviting a response. I'm always asking people to respond after I have a spiritual conversation in some way. I think the biggest obstacle to our friends coming to faith is our lack of invitation to them after a great spiritual conversation. Having a spiritual conversation and not inviting response of some kind is like doing surgery and not stitching someone back up. Invitations wrap the conversation up so you don't let their spiritual gut stay hanging out there. It's a good image, isn't it? It's like you get them into these deep conversations, and then it's like, all right, see you later. It's like, no, we want to always ask an appropriate next step. Do you want to pray? Can I pray with you right now? Would you want to come to church with me? Are you ready to give your life to the Lord right now? I'd love to pray for you if you haven't received Christ. I mean, I don't know what the right step is, but there's a number of possible steps you could ask, but we want to ask them to take a step. When Jesus has spiritual conversations with people in the Gospels, he's always giving them a next step. Follow me, go and sin no more, right? Go tell them about me, don't tell them about me. He's always inviting some kind of active response that helps them even internalize their own story. And so with that, I want to do a little case study with us just to kind of practice this out. And before I do that, I want to finish my story with my neighbor. So with my neighbor, it became this pattern of him wanting to have these conversations with me and then never wanting to go further with it. And so one day when we were driving, and I kept trying to think, man, how do I like get this door to really come open? God gave me another image. So kind of like the gas line for that woman yesterday. My neighbor and his partner, he wasn't married, but they were like together for like 30 years or something. they loved cats. And they had all these feral cats that would come in and out of their house. And it was really interesting how much they loved these cats. It was like their kids. So one day when I was talking to him, God gave me the image that he is like a feral cat. Like, he doesn't want to get too close, but he wants to be close, and then he just runs away, and he's like hard to gather up. And I said, man, you're like a feral cat. He's like, what? What are you saying to me? I'm just kidding. I said, no, hear me out. I said, you're like a feral cat. It's like you want to be close to God, but you don't want to be too close. As soon as he gets close, you're running away. And I said, I think the reason you like cats so much is you relate to them. Guy starts crying. Yeah, you were laughing at me, suckers. Guy starts crying, and he's like, yeah, you're so right. And anyways, he's like, I need God. He's like, I am like that. I don't belong here. I don't fit in. I am like a feral cat, which is weird hearing like this grown older guy crying. So I'm like, all right, you need to come to the Lord, man. I need to pray for you to receive Christ. Let's do this. He's like, all right, we'll do that sometime. And I'm like, no, right now. He's like, all right, I gotta go. See you later. So I'm like, you are a feral cat. I didn't say that. I was internally. He and I have really good relationship at this point, by the way. So I have some leeway here. So again, going in my garage, watching sports, coming to church. Well, I come back from church one day, and he's coming back from a beer run for more football, and he pulls up, and he rolls down his window, and he's like, today's the day. I'm ready to come to the Lord. And so I go in my garage with him and like talk for, I don't know, hour longer or whatever, and I pray with him to receive Christ right in there. It was amazing. Ben started with the angry truck driver tirade. Still totally in relation with him today, even though I don't live near him anymore. He's always calling. He's like, man, I miss you. It's not the same here. He's like, these guys suck. They don't even watch football. Like, blah, blah. Like, he's still the angry old dude, but we just have a great relation there. And I share that because we have to know how to share our stories and the Jesus stories right in there. And so when I was talking with him about the whole feral cat thing, I looked at him with the prodigal son. I mean, like, he's like there, he's gone, he's back, like, and he could connect with that. And I want to help people see this. So I'm constantly sharing those little bits of Jesus stories right into them, even before I get to the gospel. I mean, I'm going to get to the gospel, and I'm not shy about the gospel, but I want to help them connect with how Jesus in Scripture, what he's already done with another person, could be relevant to what he could do with them in this real life. So I like that. It's a little different way of thinking about it than you're probably used to. So my mind frame, I'm asking great questions. I'm looking for the handle. And if their spiritual curiosity is high, like they're open, then I'm going to find ways to share my story and the Jesus stories right into their life. That's why I'm getting into so many spiritual conversations. I try to follow that. I'm looking for those things. And they go there. And people tend to feel like it was a great conversation when I'm done talking with them. They don't feel like they're bullied. They don't feel like I was like coming over the top. It's like, wow, that really related to my life. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're hoping for. That would be relationally connected evangelism right into the middle of their life and their heart. So I want to do a little case study and give you time at your table to talk about this. So here's the scenario. You're eating lunch with on campus with a friend, and all of a sudden, someone who you do not know comes up to your table and asks if they can share your table with you because no more are open. So how would you usually think about this situation normally, which that's a redundant word, your mind frame? How would you want to be thinking about the situation now, your mind frame? And what is a good question you could ask them to find a handle? So talk in your table groups and get a couple notes. I'll give you just a couple minutes and we'll come back and talk about it. Let's come back. So we're not going to discuss this part yet. We're going to discuss in a minute, but I'm going to show you the response. This is what you do. This is what you do. I'm going to show it right on the slide. This is what you did. You asked them, what is your spiritual background? And they responded that they had a little bit of one. They went to church a little bit with their family in middle school, but in high school, their family let them choose. They said that they went sometimes to church in high school. You are tempted to end the conversation there, but since you are believing the harvest is ready, you ask them one more question. What do you think about Jesus or church now that you are in college? And they responded by telling you that they're pretty much over it. Church is not really for them because it was boring and there were a lot of hypocritical people. That they don't think you need to be a Christian to have a relation with God. Ever heard that one before? Okay, so go back in your group. What handles are you discovering in this story? What are one or two more questions you would want to ask them to find out more? And what story would you tell them about Jesus, or what point would you make? Do you want me to keep this slide up or this slide up? This one? Split decision. I'll do this. What's the handle you're discovering, or handles? What's a question or two more you could ask? And what story would you want to tell them about Jesus in the Gospels?